This is part 2 of the video where we are trying to find the length of the altitude of W, X, Y, Z through vertex W, where W is negative 60 and 20, X is negative 80, negative 90, and Y is 100 and 0. In the previous video, we broke down the altitude and a plan to help us figure out how we're going to find the length of the altitude, but we ran out of time on the calculations. So in this one, we're going to calculate the slope of xy, the y-intercept of xy to get the equation of xy. We're going to find the equation of the altitude by doing the negative reciprocal of the slope of xy, the y-intercept using a point, and then we're going to calculate our equation. Once we know the two equations, we're going to solve by substitution, elimination, or graphing, and then we're going to take that point of intersection along with the original point W and find the length of my altitude.
Really wanted to keep the pumpkin pie with ice cream and whipped cream like Mr. Murray. You're welcome to go to the staff room because there's lots of extra pie, so please help yourself. Thanks.
Sorry for the delay, we had an announcement. Okay, so we're going to try to follow that by doing our calculations. So that's going to be my solution. So for the solution, I'm going to start with this and work my way back. So we're going to find the slope first. So I like to do a table of values and find the differences. So we're going to do negative 80, negative 90, and 100 and 0. And then figure out how did I get from negative 80 to 100? We added 180. How do we get from negative 90 to 0? We added 90. So the slope of xy is delta y over delta x, or 90 over 180. I can divide both of those by 90 to get 1 over 2. So the slope of xy is 1 over 2. So I'm going to write that up here, that my slope was 1 over 2. So I now know the slope. I need to find the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, we're going to do y equals mx plus b. I'm going to use my slope of 1/2 and the point 100 and 0. So 100 for x, 0 for y. Now 1/2 times 100, that's secretly 100 over 1. So I do numerator times numerator. 1 times 100 is 100. Denominator times denominator, so that's 2. 100 divided by 2 works out nicely. We get 50. And then I would subtract 50 to the other side to get negative 50 equals our y-intercept. So on my plan, I'm going to mark that this is negative 50, which means I can now write my equation. Equation number 1 is going to be y equals m, so 1/2 x, and then take away 50. Now I need to go and try the other side. So on this side, we're doing equation number 2 of the altitude. So I need to start by finding the negative reciprocal of the slope. So the slope over here was 1/2. So the negative reciprocal of that should be negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. So now I have my slope. And then I can find the y-intercept using y equals mx plus b. We put in negative 2 for our slope. And then my point x and y is going to be negative 60 and 20. So 20 for y, negative 60 for x. Negative 2 times negative 60 is positive 120. And then I would subtract 120 from 20 to get negative 100 as my b. So I'm going to mark up here that my y-intercept is negative 100. So that means that the equation of the altitude is y equals negative 2x, that's the slope, take away 100. So now what I need to do is solve these two by substitution or elimination. I'm run out of space, so I'm going to just bring a piece of paper up here and write on it. So to do substitution or elimination, it's your choice. We could do graphing, but I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to maybe do substitution. So I'm going to write out the equations. We have y equals 1/2 x take away 50. And y equals -2 x minus 100. So one of the things that I notice about the two equations is that I really don't like having a fraction in the one. So one of the things we can do to get rid of the fraction is we can multiply everything in this by the denominator of 2. So I'm going to take that entire equation and multiply by 2. So I'm going to go 2 times y is 2y. 2 times 1/2, this is secretly a 2 over 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 2 is 2. So I get 2 over 2x. And then 50 times 2 is 100. 2 divided by 2 is simply just 1. So 2y equals 1x, or just x, take away 100. So if I want to do substitution, usually we rearrange one of the two equations to get x or y by itself. And I already have that. This one here, the y is already by itself. So what I'm going to do is everywhere I see a y, we're going to put in -2 minus 100. And then all I need to do is expand out my bracket and rearrange to solve. So 2 times -2x is -4x. 2 times -100 is -200. And that still equals x take away 100. We need to move one of the x's to the opposite side. I like to move the smaller one. So -4 is smaller than +1. So I am going to add 4x to both sides to cancel that out. So I get -200 equals 5x take away 100. So 4x plus 1x is 5x. And then if you don't like having the x on the right-hand side, you can flip it over or leave it the way it was. And then I need to add 100 to both sides. And I get 5x equals -100. And then we would divide by 5. -100 divided by 5 is -20. So that means that that point of intersection that we weren't sure about, so the one that was here, I now know that this point here, half of that point is -20, and then we still need to find what the y part of that point is. So we're going to come back to here. Once I know that x is -20, I'm going to come back to that y equation and put -20 in everywhere I see x. So -2 times -20 is +40. +40 take away 100 is -60. So they intersect at the point -20, -60. So if I come back to my plan, right, we were here, we had our two equations. I now know that the point of intersection here is the point -20, -60. So the only thing left to do is calculate the length using my 2 points. So we're going to find the length of the altitude. I'm going to do that here. So the length of the altitude between those 2 points. So I have the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So I'm going to do that. This is 0.1. So this is x1, y1. Every point has an x and a y. And this is x2, y2. So I get the square root of x2, -20, take away x1 negative 60 squared plus y2 negative 60 take away y1, which is 20 squared. So negative 20 minus minus 60. When you have two negative signs in a row, that ends up making it a plus. So negative 20 plus 60 is 40 squared. And then negative 60 take away 20 is negative 80 squared. And then I'm going to use my calculator. So I'm going to do 40 squared plus negative 80 squared. And I get 8,000. So this is going to be the square root of 8,000. I could check to see if that works out nicely, but it doesn't. I get 89.44, and I would rather leave it as an exact value instead of making it a decimal. So to finish off this question, I am just going to write that my presentation is therefore the length of the altitude is the square root of 8,000. All right, and that was our big problem on altitudes.